Yeah, so this is where we got to last time. We've got just the two surfaces, but they are big surfaces. But I was thinking about this the last couple of days. I haven't done any changes on it, but I was thinking that actually I got this top surface slightly wrong, really, because I was talking about, this accelerating, what I'd call accelerating towards the outside edge. In other words, the curvature gets bigger and bigger, and then we've got the CVs on here. I'll put those on. Push the CVs out to the outer edge to capture that curvature, and that's perfectly fine, except that this roof, of course, has a lot of taper on it, so it comes from here to here. So really, this isn't quite right, but it doesn't matter, because you can, with surfaces, I'm often starting off with one surface, and then I'm often using trim convert to cut it up and modify it, and it's just a starting point to get to that stage. The other thing that I don't remember putting on Z sections, but there are Z sections on here, which are actually really handy, because if we look at the Y section there, you can't really see there's much wrong with that surface. It seems to be, it's a little bit high there, but it's okay. But if you put the Z sections on, you can really see that surface isn't meeting the data, that it's, it's too rounded here, really, probably a bit low, and on this side it's a bit high, and you can see that very, very clearly in the Z sections, that it's not following the Z sections. So what I do need to do is do some trim converting on this and split it up into various. It won't be one surface, it'll have to be a number of surfaces, probably. I mean, I might be able to do it from maybe here to here, as one surface, but I want to get closer to the data so that we've got more of that shape in it. But at the same time, I've got to make sure that when we get to this back edge, this is going to be the slightly tricky bit. The back edge flattens out, so this might be curved round, but this has to flatten out. So I thought what we should do is maybe start from this back edge and try and get this detail in, and then work backwards up the surface to try and get that right. It's always, surfacing is an iterative process. If you want the best quality, I know sometimes people will put in curves everywhere and then just fill in the spaces, and that can get you a model that's complete, but it's not the best. It's not going to be the best quality, because this way we're exploring the data. We're trying to work out what is in the data, what's the best way of achieving that, the surface. Whereas if you put a curve in, you're sort of, especially if it's you're trying to create a theoretical intersect curve, you're really creating that in space. If we look in here, where that intersect is, if you were trying to invent that curve, well, the chances are you'd never get it where it should be. By putting in surfaces and trying to get the surfaces correct to the data and then extending them, you get that intersect exactly where it should be. I haven't got that yet, but that's what I'm going to work on. So I'm going to start from this back edge. So I'm now going to, I can't remember what curves 3 was, it doesn't really matter. These curves, as I said before, are often temporary. So I'm not going to spend time thinking of good names for them. I'm just going to call that curves 4. And then at some point I might look back at them and think, I don't need any of those, I'll just delete them. Doesn't really matter. So curves 4. I do like that bright green. I find that really easy to see. So what I want to do is create this little surface at the back, first of all, because you can see here, it goes all the way across and obviously intersects with the surface coming down. But if I build that and then work back up that surface and try and get closer to the data as I'm doing that, and get the transition from this flat area across here to this curved area, that's going to be slightly tricky. So we'll start off, what we'll do, we've got this curve here, which is quite close to what we want. And so that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to go into curve edit, duplicate, and I'm going to do no rebuild and just pick that edge there and press go. I'll take the CVs off the surface just to avoid confusion. And then we can look at that in plan view, in top view. It's actually quite different, the shape, because I think what I did on this surface here is it was shorter than this and I've extended it. So often this happens, it just starts to curve up. So hence the reason for having, the bigger the surface, the better, so if I had started off from out here, then that would have met that shape better, but it doesn't matter. So that curve, we need symmetry on it. So we're going to go into object edit symmetry, and we're going to just move these CVs around. And why have I got two of them? Let me pick that CV. I tell you why. I did this last time, didn't I? It's because I've left that on. So it's trying to pick two CVs. So it's picking one and another one somewhere. So I want a single CV, but just didn't think of looking there. So this one, I'm going to just move it in the X direction for now, because then, if I build a surface there, it's going to be completely consistent with that. Build a surface off the back edge, it'll be completely consistent with this surface, but that may not be what we want. I think it might be too extreme. And so this point here, I think we do need to change the spacing of these CVs. So I need to pull that outboard. I think the spacing of the CVs has got a bit too extreme in terms of the spacing of it. Let's bring that round so that we get close to the shape at this end, somewhere like that. And then this one, I'm going to pull that back so that we pull it closer in the middle there. Something like that. So the spacing is now different to what we have on the surface. It won't cause a major problem. It just means that we'll adjust the spacing on that surface at some point, probably to suit this. Now, we're looking at that curve in plan view. If I look at it in side view and go into it a bit, that curve just needs to come up a bit so we get to that bottom edge there. And I think it was just pure luck that we've ended up with that just being exactly, well, maybe it wasn't pure luck, maybe it was the data that's directed us there, but somehow that's ended up at exactly the right angle. And I'm not sure how that happened really, but I think it's to do with that plane that I created. So I've got a layer here called planes, and if I switch the planes off, probably switch the planes off in the construction plane editor as well. Yeah, so I should switch those back on again. If I keep those on, don't know what that one was. That's not visible, so I don't know where that is. Doesn't matter. This is the glass house plane I had. So yeah, I've gone back to global space. But if I go and pick that plane there, I think that plane is actually parallel to this line. That's how that's happened. So when I put the back edge of that surface in, it's parallel to that plane. That was just a bit of luck, probably. Okay, so I'm now going to build a surface off here, and you could do it either by a monorail, so I could put profile in and rail it round, or easier, because I've just got one curve, is just to use MS Draft. So if I go into MS Draft, I'm going to pick that curve and accept. Now, what have I got here? So I'm not getting a surface. So the reason is, and you can't see length in there. It's all grayed out. So that's a clue as to the fact that we've got two surface on, which for some reason is on. What two surface does, if I was to pick, say, that surface there, it now tries to get a surface between that curve and that surface. Not what I want. So I'll undo that. So if you get a 0, if you look at that and you think, well, that says 5,000 something, and I'm not getting a surface, but it is grayed out, then it's because you've left two surface on. So if I take that off and obviously I don't want a length of 5,000. Let's make it 200. I don't know what length it'll be, but it won't. That'll definitely be more than we need. I've also lost the selection of that curve. That's better. So we've now got a surface with that length in it. It's going in the wrong direction. We can flip the surface around the other way. Now the other thing we want to do is we go into our section menu, because we're not getting sections through there, and we want sections through everything. So I don't know why the sections have gone off, but that's how it is. So if I go into y-axis selection, don't really need that to be quite so many. Let's make that 200. If you were working to scan data from a laser scan data, then you might want that many sections. But on this, we're trying to just create a nice clean version of the mesh data, but we don't, by putting too many sections in, too much detail, it's not necessary. We just want to get an idea of what's going on here. So we can either use the draft angle here in the slider, do that, or you can use Alt in that box there, which slows it down a bit, or of course you can grab hold of that handle on the screen there and move it around. So what we're trying to do is just get an approximate angle there that suits the sections as they go around. And you can see we're not on the data around here, but that doesn't matter, because if we have history on here, which I think we have, yes, we've got create history on here. So with history, and this applies in so many menus, you don't always want history on. You need to think about, do you want history on or not? Because sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Here I want that on, because what I then want to do is change that curve and get this surface closer, because the curve obviously doesn't know anything about the surface itself, and rather than actually modifying that surface, which is the other way of doing it, it's easier to modify the curve. Okay, so we also want to change the length of this. It's too long, so I can just grab hold of that arrow there and move that way, or you can go into the menu and do it numerically if you want to. Doesn't matter. Again, you can use Alt in that box if you want to, if you needed to slow down that length, or you can type in a value. So if you know it's 50 mil, you can put that in. But I'll make it bigger than it needs to be, but not too big. The other thing that we can do, because in automotive surfacing, you pretty much never want a flat surface. So this is degree 1. It's going to be a flat surface in that direction. We never really want that. So let's go into explicit control. And so now we can, actually, we don't need explicit control. What am I talking about? If we go into crown mode rather, and proportional, so that gives us a degree 2. And then we can add some crown to that. So if I go and do that, now you can see that it's adding crown the wrong way, and I can flip that around the other way, so it goes that way. It's adding crown, and it's doing it by moving this hull. So again, you could do that by just moving the hull, but you can also do it in this menu. And there's a few other menus like that, like the skin one we found the other day, which I'd forgotten about, to be honest. Actually has crown in it, which is really nice, because when I update that, when I change that curve, of course this is all going to update, which is nice. So you just have to decide how much crown do we want. Like I say, we're trying to clean up the data, and as Lardo said the other day, the modeling tools in other systems like 3D Max, I've never used it, but I think they don't give you the level of control that you got in Alias, so you wouldn't expect the meshes to be 100% perfect. We're trying to create something that's much more polished and perfected, really. So we just decide, well, which of these sections do we want to use as for the shape that we want, or do we want to just change it to suit our design needs? But you can do that way. the other options here, so you've got crown end, which is why this move is moving. If I make it crown central, it will move the center row instead. So that's still putting crown on it, but it's just doing it a slightly different way. But in this case, it's crown end that we want. Something like that. So now we've got that in place, and I know this is all on the wrong layer, but it doesn't matter. It's not important. We can sort that out later. We'll take the CVs off that surface there, and then I'm just going to modify the curve and see if we can get a bit closer to here. Might be worth putting a section through there. So if I go into, let's go into this plane here. So let's go and set the plane to the plane we set up here. So that one, and then I'll go into left view, and if we zoom in, so we are parallel to that plane here, which is very fortunate. Now it would be worth putting in a section just going through this way, just to get us just, you know, to see what's going on here. So okay, so that's the section I want. So you can see that we are actually quite different to what's going on there. And we also want these sections. So let's just change that to 200 and put that back on. I mean, the only one we want is that one really, but it doesn't matter. Oh no, what I'm confusing myself as well is I'm looking at this section thinking this is a long way out, but that's the section through that surface. So let's hide that one. We're not interested in that one at the minute. That's better. So now we can see the section here versus the data. So if we look at that section going around there, it needs to be tighter to that data. I don't know why I'm looking at both sides, because it is completely symmetric. But there seems to be a bit of a kink there. So we've got to decide, you know, do we follow this line and just carry on, or do we get closer to there? And actually looking at the data, it looks like we've got to tuck in behind this shape here. So I think we need to bring that right into that point. That's what we should do. Now we've got history on that draft surface. So if I go and go into the transform CV, and we'll pick that point there and then just pull it inboard. So I'm mainly interested in trying to get to this point here, not so much the data there. We can add a higher degree. We're only degree 3, so let's do that. The other thing that we can do, because if I keep that point there and start moving CVs around here, then this point's going to move around a lot. And like I say, we need to get that tucked in behind there, which is where it is. So I think we should move that point closer to the end of the data there, so that when we move CVs here, it keeps that point, keeps that edge where we want it, and we can just change the shape. So to do that, if we go into the transform CV menu, and I'm just going to slide that along here, and then we'll go back and move it in the Y direction, so we're closer to that section. The reason for cutting the section is that, you know, you can see that down here it curves around, which is probably not what we want. We certainly don't want to be comparing the bottom edge, really. We want to be comparing part of that surface. So that means we've done that change there, but of course it's pulled away from here. So let's go and move that point there. I'll move that in the X direction. So we're getting closer to the section there. Probably move it inboard as well, because that comes off at a different angle. So we'll move it inboard. So I'm looking here. I'm not bothered too much about what's going on there. I know I'm close, but it'll be pulling it away. I know that. And then we could, if we moved it in the X direction, of course, it's going to move it away from here. You can do that. You can just, you know, keep massaging it in 2 directions. But you could also, the slider is quite useful, because you can keep that sort of area pretty much as it is, use the slider instead of moving it in X. And now we're doing a similar effect. It's moving it there, but it's not moving it so much there. So you can use the slider, or you can use X, Y, and Z, entirely up to you. There's no no rule that says you can't do it either way, but it's worth knowing about the slider and how that can sometimes help. Now we've got a very smooth shape here because it's only degree 3, but maybe we need to get a bit more of that kink into that. There's a bit of a change of direction. This is a bit of a lazy curve, and we want a little bit more tension in that, I suppose. So why don't we make that? We'll increase that. And all the time, the draft surface is doing what it's doing. I don't know what the CVs are doing, but I know that it was clean when we started. If we increase the degree a bit, maybe make it 5, so it gives us a bit more chance to give a bit more shape in here. It's quite subtle, really. And I'll just now move that point only in the X direction, just to get a bit closer to that shape. I mean, of course, you can do whatever you want to do, whatever you need to do to create the shape that you want, and I'll pull that back into the center there. So I think that'll do. You might, if you really want that angle there, then you might actually want to break that into 2 pieces and put a blend between the 2, but I'm going to try and keep it relatively simple. The other thing that we could do actually to give a bit more curvature here is to pull that point outwards. Of course, you could do that without doing it. Don't go too far, because then we're going to be dramatically different to what's going on in here. You want it fairly, I don't want to pull it out here. That would be very bad. But you could pull it out a little bit more, or you could, if you don't want to push those 2 close together, you can always increase the degree a little bit more, say 6, and then just pull that point out there, something like that. So we're sort of capturing that shape to some extent. You just got to decide how much snap you want in that area, or whether you want a slightly softer shape. But we'll go with that. So let's have a look back at this surface. So that's ended up, I didn't put explicit control on when I did the draft, but it's actually ended up as degree 6. So perfectly fine. It's still a nice, simple, low number of CVs really for the shape that we're trying to create here. So we've got this going up here. If we go into Q, well, I say if we go into Q, I mean if we go into query edit, so under object edit, I think it is, yeah, query edit there. I've got it on the hotkey Q, but if you go to query edit and then just pick that surface, you can pick up from where you left off. So if I go query edit, because I've got history on in this menu, that allows me to carry on working on it. So if I wanted to change the length of this, which is what I want to do, I can actually go and just continue doing that. Because what I want with this is to create a surface that's consistent across there. And I mean, if we look in the center, this is coming down at this point, and then this is coming down at this point, and we're going to have to create a curve going around this corner. So I'm not sure how this is going to work out at all. Like in so many cases, it's impossible to, I could sit down for a long time and just work out how these surfaces should work, but I'm not going to do that. I just do it by creating something and then seeing where I need to change it. So I'm thinking I'll keep the length of this bit and ignore the bit in the center. Because if I keep that length there, then I can start to create that curve around there, which is, I think, one of the other things I want to do. I'm not sure whether this surface should come down to this point. It may well do, or should it join up to the top there? I don't really know, but I'll discover that as I go. Obviously, if I join it up to the top, it's pulling away from that section, but will that give me what I want? I'm not sure, to be honest, but we'll find out as we go. So we created this surface, which comes so far around here, but then, as I say, it starts to curve around this way, so we need to start creating this shape here. And we've got this intersect with the top surface, so I'm going to just use that to start with. And I'm going to, I don't know whether, I mean, I used to use blend curves a lot, and I went off them for quite some time, and I've sort of started thinking that actually maybe I should use them again. But I mean, you can do this either two ways. So I'm going to try and create a curve coming from here to here somewhere to try and follow that line a bit, and see what that gives us. And so I'll show you two methods of doing that. So let me save this. So let's see. Time. So I'll show you the method that I've been tending to use more recently, which is to use, I mean, you can use either, well, actually, I'll show you the edit point curve, because you can do it with CV curve. I could do it. So there's multiple ways, to be honest. So if I say go, obviously I can just put a point there. I could put other points in, but I tend to do a lot of my curves are just degree 1 to start with. And then I just change the degree up to, it's going to be degree 5. And then I would do a line here. So I do a line, G2, put history on. And then you can move that around if you wanted to, but just do history on that side as well. And go back into the menu. So do that to there. And then we can just pull these points around, and you can go activate and do the same thing around here. You can pull any of these. So it's what I like about this method. And if you click on activate at that end, I can just pull that around. It's very familiar because it's exactly the same as we do for everything else. It's sort of, but it's got this added advantage. You can flip one from one end to the other. So that's one possibility. So let me get rid of that. So that's option 1, really. You can also do, and this is slightly quicker really, is if you go into the edit point curve, and I've set up in my own shelf, I have these set up with various degrees on, but if I put it on degree 5, that gives us enough CVs both ends to give us G2 continuity. Then we can say go, and we can just pick a point over here and a point over here. Oops, daisy. Let me do that again. Point over, I can try get it on there, that point there, and a point there. So that by specifying that it's degree 5, we've already got degree 5 in there, and then I just go through the same process of just doing a line on both ends. It's exactly the same, and you know, just moving those around, just like I did before with the CV curve. So that's option number 2. I think the edit point curve just gets you there slightly quicker. All the CVs are equally spaced, so that's got its uses. And then the other option, which I stopped using for a long time, is the blend curve. So I don't know whether you've seen this before, but you know, the trouble with blend curves is a different menu system completely, and it works in a different way to sort of CV and edit point curves. So you can, but you might like this, I don't know. If you go into a new curve, you just double click on that. So we've got degree 5 in there. So I just go. I can just slide up that CV there, the CV curve on surface rather, go up that curve on surface, and you see there's already, it's looking different because there's a symbol there that doesn't look familiar. And then we can go onto this one. That's gone the wrong side. So actually it's gone on that wrong edge, but I can pull it across to the other side. So under edit, we can actually go and pick this. This one here, again, you can do that. Now the symbols there, you've got one which is tangency and then one which is curvature. Without the CVs on, you don't know what's happening there, in my opinion. So you want to put the CVs on to see what's going on. But if I go and pick the curvature one, it'll do that. If you pick that one, it does both of them. So it's moving them further out. So you can see it's how different it is. And there's a whole load of other things in here. And you can obviously move this, you can move that point as well. So that will actually slide across that surface and that will slide up and down. If you like it, stick with it. But I would definitely recommend you put the CVs on so you can see what they're doing. But I mean, I used to use that all the time. But the other thing that I find frustrating with that sometimes is you can't seem to flip this. Sometimes you find that the direction of it refuses to go in the direction you want, and it's going maybe in that direction rather than that direction. Whereas, you know, the edit point curve is just completely under your control. It's simple, it's familiar, and I just like that about it. But this is, you know, doing it this way where it's pretty much the same, but I'm actually operating on the CVs directly, which I much prefer. I mean, the blend curve, if you modify the underlying curves that this is sitting on, that can be a benefit. But I think that, to me, the inconsistency with the rest of the system is why I've gone off it, whereas this is completely consistent with the rest of Alias. But you know, feel free to use it if you want to use blend curves, if you're happy with them. So I'm going to try and modify this. So with a blend like this, let's just create let me just save this a second. Yes, so if you're creating any blend, what you want it to look like, so if I've got, say, a blend like this, what you got to think about is, if you look at the end tangents here, so you've got by end tangent, I mean the line between that point and that point, that gives you the angle at the end, and the same with that one there. If you imagine a theoretical point where those two intersect, so in other words, I just do that in reality. So in other words, you don't need to build this, just imagine this. So imagine that point there where those two cross over. So let me just take the CVs off there to avoid picking any of those. What you want is the 3 CVs on this side to always be that side of that point, and these always to be that side of that point. So you never want this, for example. You wouldn't, hang on a minute, you wouldn't want that up there, for example, because it's the wrong side of that point. It needs to be down here. And likewise with this one, it's always got to be in this direction down here. So actually, just to make it simple, I'm going to align that to there. So that's an example of where that flips around the wrong way, but it's easy to correct. Let's put those there. So I'm only doing this so that it's easy for me to adjust these. So if I do query edit on there, I can pick up where I left off. So that point there always wants to be below that intersect, never above it. Same with this, and the other thing that you want to do, and the same on this side, that point should never be that side. It should always be that side. If you cross over that way, then you can see the curve here is doing something weird, and you're making, well, you're just making a weird curve. It's not. I mean, I would call that what you're after is what I'd call a balanced curve. So by that I mean, if you think of this point and the spacing of that point to this one, to that one, to that one, in general, what you want is the spacing between there and there to be smaller than the spacing between there and there, which is then smaller to that one. Or maybe these two could be equal, but you don't want this spacing. So you don't want that one smaller than that. That's not going to give you a good shape in general. You know, likewise, you wouldn't want that spacing to be small and that to be large. You want either that spacing to be the same as that or slightly less. And then, I mean, the spacing there actually doesn't matter so much. It's just, you don't want to take this point in too far as well. You don't want that like that. That would be too extreme. So even if you followed the rule of this is smaller than that, that's okay. But having that extreme spacing there is generally not a good idea. So you want it a bit more further back than that. So something like that, where that's about the same as that, or slightly bigger, and the same on that side. And these points, the 3 points on that side of the intersect, 3 points on that side of the intersect. So that's the rule, really. And so that's the rule that I want to follow there. So let me just take the CVs off that surface and that one, so it's a bit clearer. It's actually the curve, isn't it, that we've got there that's got CVs on it. So here we've got one there, one there, one there. So in that plan view, the imaginary intersect between the end tangent there, to take that point, that CV, and extend it out to there, and that one between that point and that point is somewhere out here. So the two intersect somewhere here. So you want always these CVs to be this side of that intersect, and the spacing, like I say, to be the spacing there. I'm not sure. Yeah, so okay, so that's the end point. I was not looking at the right point. That's the end point there. So if I go Q on that, because I've got history on it, I can have a look at that. So you've got that point, you imagine the line going through there and intersecting that. These points are this side. So I can't have that going that way because it crosses over that line. So it must be then, you know, not in the right place. Not that I want that shape anyway. So it's trying to, the difficulty is, you know, we're trying to create this shape following the mesh, but follow these rules at the same time. So that's quite tricky. Here I can see what's happening is that we are pulling away from the data. We're going inboard of the data here, which suggests that, you know, this end point isn't in the right place because it's taking a tangent which isn't actually pointing in the right direction. It's either that or this surface needs modifying, so that we start to get this curve going around that corner. It sort of meets the peak there reasonably well. If I adjust these points here, trying to think of that rule all the time, then we can get close to that, to there. So that looks quite promising. It looks like maybe this end point is about in the right place. You can just play around with the end points and see what happens. Something like that. But this one, I don't think it's ever going to work because I think the tangent is just pointing in the wrong direction. That tangent is pretty consistent all the way. You know, maybe if we go back that far, it might work. I'm also looking at this shape because that shape and that shape aren't quite consistent with each other, and you know, we'll have to come up with a compromise between those two to get that to work as best we can. So maybe pulling it back a bit further there and then just pushing that into the corner. Yeah, maybe that's going to work okay. But the other, like I say, the other option, because we've got history on here, we can do this. We can just go into that surface there and maybe just pull that out a bit, because it does look as though it's obviously diving into the data here because we were expecting that to curve round. But I could do this where I go pick a whole hull and we just pull this out a bit, and you can watch the curve updating as we do this. So we get that going around there, and now that curve's getting a bit much closer. So that's a good thing. It's probably come off the data here, as you can see, because I've pulled it this way, it's going to come off the data here. So this means that if we pull that outboard, we need to push that inboard to compensate. So we just do that gently. And the curve's looking pretty good, actually, not too bad. And I'll just push that out a little bit, see if we can get a bit close to the data. Not that it's the end of the world if it's not correct, but I think that's a little bit better. And then we can, let's just have a look again at, if I go Q, activate that end. Let's just see if we can push that along a bit, because I don't want to take that too far up that way, because it's well, it seems like, well, maybe we have to do it. Maybe we have to do it, but ideally we want it a little bit further down here, I suppose. But I think we do have to take it back to there, and just see what happens. So I'm looking at the spacing there to there and that spacing there to there, just making sure that we're following the rule of this length being equal or longer than this one. The rule is, I mean, that rule just gives you better, curvature, basically. So if we look at so if you follow that rule, then your curvature should be pretty nice. You can see it flows nicely. If I don't follow that rule, so if I just go query edit on that, activate this side, and I pull this down here, well, maybe we can't see that really, but yeah, in general, this gives you a much better result. That sort of shape or that sort of spacing of the CV. So again, CVs are everything. You can you might start to see that I don't put the diagnostics on very often because the CVs just tell you so much. Obviously, I do put the diagnostics on from time to time, but I can tell from the CVs pretty much whether that's going to be a good shape or not. I'm not sure whether that's really quite close enough to the data there, so I think I'm going to go back to this surface and just do a little bit more of a move on that. I'm just going to increase the mouse sensitivity, maybe zoom in a bit. I just feel it's gone a bit too inboard there still, so let's bring it out a bit more. So I'm going to make it there. And I think my CV, I don't know what's happened to my CVs there now. I mean, that's gone far too far towards that one, so that's not right. So I want to push that one out to get it back to the data. But this is the beauty of history. You just go around doing this and seeing the curves update, etc. Let me just take those CVs off, query edit that curve. So if I activate that, yeah, these two CVs are far too close to, whether it's not that they're too close together so much as the fact that this one is maybe that, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but if you look at the tangent there and you find the intersect to that one, that's probably not quite right. I want to pull this one back this way, push that one into the corner a bit, just to make it a bit more balanced as a curve. So that one has gone too far. If I just pull that in, of course we change the shape, so we have to pull, well, we're going to change the shape anyway. Let's pull that all down there and then activate that end, and then push that way. It's got to be, I think what it is the length of this leg, this distance from here to the theoretical, and the length of this one are quite different. This one's quite short compared with that one. and that's why we're getting this issue here. Let's pull that point into there as well. So yeah, I did feel instinctively that that point needs to go to the right a bit, and maybe that instinct is correct. So that's better, because now, I mean, you can see in the angles as well that those angles are more equal. That's another indication that's in a better place in terms of the balance of that. So if I try and bring that into that corner a bit, see what happens to this point, maybe push it that way, activate that one, just do that. So I mean, these are quite, I pushed them quite a long way together, but it's okay. I think because of the length of this, we have to do that in order to get around that corner and to get into that shape. So we've got, you know, this is bigger than that. Angles here are all fairly equal, which means the intersect between the end tangents, you know, those are good in relation to that. And then the spacing of that to that is pretty much equal. And so that's okay. So let's get rid of these curves here. So we've now got a curve in there. Let's have a look at that in side view and see how that's doing. So what you don't want to do, if I just save that, the temptation sometimes is you get a curve that's not actually quite in the right position, and it can be sort of quite tempting to think, well, I'll just add an extra CV there and just push it up a bit or whatever it needs to do. It is nearly always the wrong thing to do. The reason it's not in the right place is because of the surface it's hanging off or the edge it's hanging off, and those are the things you want to modify first to try and get that closer, and then you can adjust that slightly. But you know, if you try and do a local change to something because it's not quite in the right place, like you could say that's too high in the Z direction, well, it's not the curve that's the problem, it's the thing it's hanging off that's the problem. So we could look at that, bearing in mind what I've done there is that's aligned to an intersect between two surfaces, neither of which, you know, both of which could be adjusted. So so that intersect, which has also got history on at this point, is a result of this surface and that surface. So let's bring that other surface back in. So I'm going into display visible. I'm using Alt V as my hotkeys there. So let's just have a look at that. I can see that that curve looks slightly high on the data, which may be just a result, you know, maybe the data is not quite right. Maybe we need to smooth out that data, or maybe the surfaces aren't quite meeting the data that we've got. Well, the surface there, let's have a look where does this curve come from? So it's actually hanging off back here. This is where I'm quite a long way off the data. So I need more curvature on that on the surface here. And this is what was, I was sort of been thinking about the last couple of days. Not that I've been looking at it closely, but I thought I got this slightly wrong really, because I put in a, you know, a general shape, general section here, and then I've extended it in down here. But actually that tightness is happening more locally because of the taper on here. So we really need to start creating a new surface in there that's going to allow us to get closer to that data, because I can't do it through this surface. It's too big and oversized, and so I need to start sorting that out. I'm also going to well, I'll put this surface, rather than glass, I just call it top, so I can include that back edge as well. So I'm going to put that surface in there. So I've got those surfaces going in there, just in the wrong layer. So it's worth just tidying up as we go. Maybe change the color so I can see that those are, that I've done something with them. Okay, so I think it's time to start thinking about splitting this surface up. I'm using trim convert. to do it. The reason I went for that big surface is because if I could have gone from that back edge all the way to the front and matched that up at the back, that would have been such a nice, simple result. But unfortunately, life is never quite that simple. But at least it's a starting point. You know, it might not be exactly what we want, but it's a starting point. The other thing that I was questioning earlier on was whether, you know, we're following the data here, but this edge here, I've sized to this point here. So if I look in the center, we've got that edge. Should it be down here? Should that be what's happening? I suspect not, but I don't know. Let's go and isolate this mesh. So should we carry that height all the way across? I don't know. If we look at the data again, so look at that from the back, and we'll rotate that way. And we'll just see whether, so if I do a non-proportional scale on that, yeah, so that looks like that if we were to carry that shape across there, let's just bring the surface back in. It might be a little high. It's the wrong bit of data. You know, the data is doing that and the surface is doing that. Obviously, the surface is very clean because it's a one constant depth, whereas the mesh dips down in the middle. It's just making decisions about how that should work, whether we should follow the data very closely or whether we should take a bit of a liberty with it and actually do that height. I mean, the other option is to follow neither of them and just do, so if I queue on that, which has still got the history on it, I'm not saying keep history on everything, by the way. You know, there comes a point in all of this where I should delete all of the history, but while we're doing this sort of work where we're trying to get everything to work together, just the basics, then the history is so useful. And a lot of people don't use the history. Some people just don't use history at all. It's just like such a, you know, it's there. It's so useful. If I bring that down a bit, obviously we're going to come off that edge, but we get a bit closer to where it is in the center. So I'm wondering whether that's the thing to do. I'm just going to go with that for the time being. So that means I'm going to raise this surface up a little bit here. I just feel that going across here will be a lot easier if we follow that nice, you know, clean line there, and do it that way. This surface here, I'm going to use as my starting point. Let's take off the sections here. So I'm not going to throw it in the bin. It's not been a waste of time at all. What I will do is I'll create a layer, which I can call it archive or something, or what would I call it, originals or something. I don't know what to call it. And I'm going to put that surface in there for the time being. So I'm going to keep it, but I'm actually going to split it up. So I won't be using it in the final model, but it's there in case I needed to go back to it and pick it up again. I'm going to, because I'm going to put yeah, I'm going to do some trim converting now. So I want to do some trim converting to use the intersect that we've got there, whether it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. And I need to somehow decide how I'm going to split this up. So I've got a curve on surface that goes from there to there. And I suspect this is going to be horrible. It's probably not going to work at all. But I'll see how it pans out. So I'm just going to do this across here. I'm guaranteed that this is going to be horrible. I'm going to take that surface because I want to work across a whole vehicle here. I'm going to have to take that surface, and I'm just going to duplicate that across the center line. So I'm going to have to do that. So I've got this curve on surface there. I'll get rid of that curve on surface because it only exists on that side surface, in fact. And then I'm going to look at this, going into surface edit, intersect on both surfaces, go that one, and do that. And then we'll do, although I know this is probably going to be terrible, I'm going to just try and do a trim convert on that lot. But I think the CVs probably go completely crazy. But it's worth a try anyway. You never know. You never know, it might work. So I'm going to just put a straight line between there. So the curve, basically the curves on surface. So I've got this top surface has now got curve on surface, curve on surface. I just need another curve on surface, and then I could do a trim convert. So I'm going to do surface edit, trim. I think this will work. If I go there, I'm going to say it'll work in mathematically. It's probably going to be horrendous. So I'm going to do project. I want, hang on a minute, can I put duplicate on there? I'm looking to duplicate that, and I'm thinking, why don't I get duplicate? So I'm going to duplicate it, just Control C, Control V. And then I'm going to go into, do it in project. Doesn't really matter either way. Curves on surface, Z, that one, which will be rail surface 2. So that's the copy. And that project there. And then if I go into, so I can now, I'll put that one, that surface. So I'll put the surface 2 is going to go into top. So if I take top off, we should, so I'm just taking the, turning top off so I can see this, but take originals, that was the original one. That's the copy. And then I wanted to just trim that, keep that, and then I want to do a trim convert on it. And I'm probably going to stop at this point because this is going to be horrible, but let me try trim convert. Now, of course, this is where you've got to keep originals in trim convert, of course. I thought it would be horrible, but I thought it would be a lot more horrible. Actually, quite surprisingly, quite good. I was expecting the CVs to go all over the place and just be unusable, but actually, that's quite good. So it's, yes, in trim convert, I could have done keep originals. I couldn't think which menu could do that in, but so I've got that, which is awful, but it's not that awful. You know, the CVs here have gone zigzagging. I'm not surprised at all. So if I go back to originals, we should still have the original surface, which is that one there, big one. Because we might want, well, we do want more bits from it because we're going to do a bit of a trim convert around here. So my plan now is to take that trim converted surface. It means I've now got an edge there. It might not be exactly on this surface, but it's close. And I can start to work on that and try and get the shape that I want, which is this sort of tightening up as we get to the outer edges.